it's a statewide immigrant organization. So it's an advocacy group. They're located mainly in Elizabeth. So the presentation that I have is what they have, is some of the slides that I have put, that they put together. And then I just took some of the information from them, not all of it. Because they have, their presentations can be like 40 pages long. And I will also say that this is obviously not a legal advice. This is more just keynotes, things that we can take out of this. Next. And again, this is just best practices. Friends, how does ICE work? Understanding our rights, undocumented residents. What happens when you see ICE encounter, and most importantly, I think for this, is how to support our friends and our neighbors. So let's start with ICE. So what is ICE? Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. We know that it's a federal agency, but most importantly, and again, for New Jersey, it's a federal agency, which is always the biggest thing. It has nothing to do with the state. So that's the reason why it's very difficult for us in New Jersey to do really anything legally, because it is a federal agency. And right now we know who's handling the federal government. There's these key divisions: enforcement and renewal operations, and Homeland Security investigators. Next. ICE surveillance. Again, federal agency that is under Homeland Security. So there's a couple of those things. And again, so they have their federal. So I will just stop a little bit and tell you that what they're supposed to do, ICE is supposed to be they're supposed to go after very specific individuals. So when we talk about databases, it's because they have access to different type of federal, state, DMV. They can also do social media and face recognition. So right now they can the database is basically everything at this point. They have access, or they have technically access to absolutely everything, not just state or federal agencies and databases. But at this point, one of the things they're doing is, again, even Facebook. But also, the other thing that it's important for us to know is this whole anonymous tip basis. So when someone says, oh, I'm calling ICE, it's because someone can actually report something to ICE, or someone to ICE, or an activity to ICE, for no real reason. You don't have to have a reason. Somebody can call the hotline and they report whatever it is that they want to report. So the way that they can get to people is in all different forms. It's not just one type of way that they can get to basically anyone if they want to. The tactics, again, we have seen, so the reason why it's important is the tactics. We've seen pictures of a little bit of the tactics. They can come to you, they can come to homes, knock on doors, they can come to public places. They can basically do anything. They can come in any way they want. Now, the pictures that we have here is how do they dress and how to acknowledge who is ICE. So ICE can dress themselves in plain clothes, or they usually are wearing uniforms, almost police uniforms. And it can say ICE. It can pretty much, some of them says ICE. They can have, what are the other ones that they get? ERO, which is the enforcement and removal operation. That can also, that they can also identify themselves as that, or as Homeland Security, or sometimes as plain police. So if you're not aware what that is, it could be plain police. So it's very difficult times to identify who they are, but not so hard because they usually come in a group. They don't usually come alone. They conduct searches and arrest. They do not identify themselves before the arrest. They usually just come into places, and it's only when you ask that they identify. They don't have to, by the way. They can, I mean, this is one of the tactics. They can just come into a place and start asking questions. It's not, they don't necessarily have to identify themselves. Unless you ask who they are, they don't have to identify themselves. And when we talk about how they can come in, the reason why it's so fearful is because the way they can come into different places is they can come into public spaces. So public spaces could be, for example, the train station, the bus station, restaurants. I mean, and again, that is a public space. So they can come in into those places without any warrant, they can just come in. They cannot come in to private places. And that's when it becomes, that means your home, that means your place of work. If you're in school, for example, we did a presentation, a very targeted get to know your rights about schools and how schools should protect themselves in case ICE comes into the schools. And that's a whole different way of handling that. But those are the places that they cannot go in. We talk about play. So again, in public places, ICE does not need a warrant to search these places. But in private places, they do need, and this is when it becomes important, which is the ICE needs a judicial warrant, which is very different. Is so warrant that is signed by a judge. And this one, thank you. So which one is this one? This one is this is just a warrant. This is a notice from ICE that basically says, I have this, but it's not signed by anyone. So this one is not the legal one. And that's one of the big differences is, and by the way, just to put a note, this is what the bid and what Montclair is actually doing, which is providing businesses with a copy of what it is. So so this is what, yeah, they're doing that one, meaning like, let me give you 2 examples of what a warrant is, which is this one, the warrant, the one before that. The one that is valid and the one that is not. So this one is a valid warrant. Okay, let's stop.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. So this one is the one that the valid one is a judicial warrant, which basically is the important part of this one is that it has to be signed by a judge. And in those warrants, basically, they usually are looking for very specific person, a very specific individual, or they're targeting something very specific. It's not just coming in. And that's the biggest thing. And again, just so you know, Montclair is doing a very good job of handing to businesses, particularly the difference between, hey, this is a valid warrant. And if someone comes in and has this, make sure you look at the bottom. It has to be signed by a judge. If it's not, then it's not a valid one. And then you can say no. So next. And so once you have one that is not valid, you can simply say when someone comes in, and again, this is for neighbors and friends, just so you know that your rights are basically, you don't have to say anything. You just have to tell people, I'm broken my fifth, but most importantly, you can just simply say, I don't need to answer any questions. And that's enough. And that's probably if you get anything out of this presentation, if you want to tell anybody anything, is that if someone confronts ICE, the biggest thing you need to say is, if they come in, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to respond to any questions. And that's it. That's the first thing you need to say. Second one is that if it's something a little bit more aggressive or they're trying to continue, you can also record the conversations. And again, you can tell them that, but that is also your right to be able to record any conversation that is happening. And you can tell them. Now, I will pause here for a second to tell you that this is what it should happen in the normal way. This is what the law is in New Jersey. That's what it should be. But again, these federal agencies at this point are doing, as we know, is a little bit of craziness happening across the country. Not just ICE, but as we know, federal agencies right now are just completely not respecting any laws as we see it. But tell you not to record it, I don't know. But right now you are entitled to record any kind of conversation with a camera, or just record it. You're allowed to do that. And of course you can always say that you can have that you're going to seek for a lawyer. The right against, again, you have the right against unreasonable search and seizures by government. Of course, you're not, again, these are your basic rights. Again, I don't know that any of you, but again, this is what we need to tell people and our friends. They know it's not reasonable when someone's going to look for something in your, whether it's your car and your house and your business. The answer is always no. They're not allowed to do that. And in New Jersey, you're also not even required to show your ID. The other part, ICE encounters. Again, we did this presentation with the schools because it was so important for them, and I'll tell you a little bit of how the school went because it was really interesting. But for now, again, don't lie to officers. It's the worst thing we can do because again, we can simply say that we don't have to answer anything. And that is enough. And if they keep asking you, you keep saying the same exact thing. You do not have to answer anything. And so let's not lie to officers. It doesn't do us any good, and it doesn't help anybody that we think that we're protecting. Don't show any false documents. Don't show anything at all if you don't have them. You don't. And obviously don't run away from the authorities. And again, we don't want this to escalate into something physical. So again, let's try to remain calm. Make sure that they know that you have the right to stay quiet. And again, just if possible, try to film or record signs of encounters. Again, if you're approached by ICE in a public space, if someone you know, again, the answer is ask them if you're allowed to leave. Again, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, if they're actually following what the rules and regulations are, they would be able to say, yes, you can, because you're not detained. Obviously, a quick little pause, things are happening, in places. It's not happening in all the places in the federal government, but that's what it should happen. You should be able to be allowed to leave unless they have a warrant. Again, stay quiet and do not give permission to ICE to search you. Again, unless they have a warrant, you don't have to do anything. And obviously, do not sign anything unless you have a lawyer present. These are your rights. Don't sign anything, don't lie, and you don't have to say anything. Your basic 3 things. Okay, public schools are private places. I just saw someone who asked the questions, are public schools public or private? Public schools are pretty much private for this purpose. If somebody wants to go into the school, they need to have a warrant. We went over this in another conversation. You need to have a warrant in order to go into the school. Somebody asked that question. What else? Next. Okay. If an ICE agent enters your home, don't let them enter your house. I mean, again, unless they have a warrant, they're not allowed to come into your house. That's the basic rule. Do not open the door. If they open the door, they're not allowed to come into your house. And if they're already violating the law, if they come in. And if they come in, do not, again, if they're forceful, obviously call the police if you have to at this point, but they're not allowed to search anything unless they have a warrant. Don't sign anything, speak to a lawyer. And if they do have a warrant, then you have to leave with them if you do have a warrant. But I mean, but the warrant, so we talk about when it's not illegal, but if it's legal, like if they have a warrant and this is for a very specific person, then you have to leave. But again, it's only the person that they're seeking, not everybody else. If they're looking for John Smith in that household and Mary Smith is in the house, no, it's only for that one person. They're not allowed to bring everybody else. Next. Kevin, you asked any difference in the rules being, they are, the rules are different, but I cannot remember what the rule, Kevin, there is a difference because we are a coastal state. I'll have to find out because I remember,
Oh,
but
so
I don't
why don't we
remember
hold
the
the,
list.
let's hold all the questions to the end because we're almost done.
Okay. Okay, the New Jersey, the Immigrant Trust Directive. Attorney General law, and so the Immigrant Trust Directive is an Attorney General law. It basically, it prohibits or encourages for police and state agencies not to collaborate with ICE and federal agencies on this. So police cannot detain or hold someone based solely on ICE request. Local and state police cannot collaborate with ICE. And local and state police cannot ask about individuals' immigration status unless it is necessary for the ongoing investigation of a serious crime. Basically means that if someone, an example, if somebody gets stopped by the police, if somebody's driving and a police officer stops you, it has to be a police officer. They cannot ask you for your status, your immigration status. That's not what this is. They can stop you for your light, for running a red light, for whatever that is, but not necessarily for your immigrant status. And that's what this Immigrant Trust Directive means. You cannot share that information with ICE and the federal government. Next, anything else? So what we're doing right now, so again, there are many other questions and there are many, again, I'm not the expert on any of this. I have been given, we have been putting together with Make the Road New Jersey and the ACLU different types of presentations. So there is a whole entire thing of resources for very specific questions and suggestions for different types of things. So for example, so again, the resources is, I always go back to Make the Road New Jersey and I keep emphasizing them because they're the ones, the ACLU has obviously understands a lot of this, but they have a bunch of other issues under the umbrella. Make the Road New Jersey specifically handles immigration things. So that's the reason why I would go to their website for any other kinds of resources that and questions that you may have. Their website is actually pretty great and they're super busy right now, but they're making the space and the time to make presentations across the state. And the last thing I want to say about them is that, so yes, so all of those are just really, these are just toolkits. I mean, all of these things could also be found there. We just wanted to give you a quick idea as to where these resources, where you can find those resources. And the last thing I wanted to say, I was telling Carrie that earlier this afternoon, they actually came, Make the Road New Jersey came to Montclair to do another presentation for Know Your Rights, but it was directed to the bid. Well, they organized it and it was for businesses and how businesses can protect not just their businesses, but also the customers. Because again, we have undocumented immigrants or immigrants of all kinds also use those kinds of services. So we are not only the workers or the ones who provide the service, we also use those services. So they did a presentation today, sponsored by the bid. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of this.
So, and next week, we're going to have, we have Eric Benson going to do a presentation on tax fairness in New Jersey. So that's a whole other thing. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to have another presentation for allies to the LGBTQ plus community. So these are some of the topics we'll be dealing with. Anyway, thanks everyone, and thanks Allison, thanks Brendan, and the wonderful Tom House. Thank you, buddy. All right, and good night. We'll see you all next week.